Hello everyone, my name is Nawa Malini. So this time I would like to present about introspective techniques. So I will begin this presentation with an overview. In these techniques, there are two types of introspective techniques used in qualitative research. And then we move on to the definition of each technique, and then how to collect the data, and how to organize and interpret the data, and the last one, how to present the findings. So the first one is an overview. Nuna 1992 points out that introspection is the process of observing and reflecting on one's thoughts, feelings, motives, reasoning processes, and mental states with a view to determining the ways in which these processes and states determine our behavior. So there are two types of introspective techniques used in qualitative research. The first one is verbal reports and the second one is the diary studies. And then the first technique that will be discussed is verbal reports. The first one is the definition of verbal reports. Verbal reports or verbal protocols are oral records of an individual's thought processes provided by the individual when thinking aloud either during or immediately after completing a language learning or teaching task. And then there are two kinds of verbal reports differentiated by when the data is collected. The first is a think aloud. The respondent asks to verbalize their thought processes while they are involved in processing language, typically while reading a text or writing an essay. And the second type is a retrospective report in which respondents verbalize their thought processes immediately after they process the language. And retrospective reports can be used with listening and speaking tasks or also after a think aloud to explore some of the comments made during the think aloud. And then about how to collect the data. Brown and Rogers 2002 list several principles that should be adhered to in conducting verbal reports. These principles include the following. Time intervening between mental operation and the report is critical, so minimize it as much as possible. And then as verbalization places additional cognitive demands on mental processing, think carefully about what you want respondents to report on and make sure that is doable. And then get the respondents to do a self-report, to just talk to themselves, not report to you or another researcher or respondent. This will provide much better data as respondents can concentrate on reporting on the task without being distracted by the demands of social discourse conventions or influenced by their perception of the expectation of the other person. And then there is a lot of information available while respondents are doing verbal reports aside from the words themselves. So the researcher should not only listen but also watch respondents and take notes of body language while respondents are doing verbal reports and include them in their analysis. So video recording is also can be useful for the researcher to take notes of the body language of the respondents. And the last one is the researcher should be aware that you cannot use verbal reports to collect information on some tasks on processes. And then several of these principles have important implications for how to conduct verbal reports. The first principle suggests that respondents' verbal reports should be recorded either while the activity is occurring or as soon as possible afterwards. And principle 2 is especially significant for individuals conducting the verbal reports in their second language. It suggests that, if possible, respondents should be allowed to use their first language. And then the principle 3, 4, and 5 suggest that researchers should take note of the nonverbal as well as the verbal behavior of the respondent. After collecting the data, now the researchers should organize and interpreting the verbal report data. One of the most challenging aspects of using verbal reports as a research tool is categorizing the data. The following are some procedures that can help you in organizing and interpreting the data. The first one, a researcher should transcribe the data and then review existing studies on language learning that make use of verbal protocols in data collection. One of the main reasons for undertaking this review is to determine whether or not there is an existing category or coding system that could be used when you analyze your data. Next, divide your data of what respondents said into thought units, that is, segments of the transcribed text that reflect a particular thought or idea. So these units are not necessarily the same as a sentence or clause. And the fourth, sort each thought unit into one of the categories you have decided to use based either on an existing coding system or one you have devised. So a coding system provides a list of categories into which the researcher places its thought unit. The coding system itself should be so clear and unambiguous that two researchers will come up with similar results in coding the data. So the advantage of using an existing coding system is that you can compare your findings with other studies, while the disadvantage is that an existing coding system may not fit your data. And then the researcher should have a second reader also code the data so that you can determine whether or not you have been objective in categorizing the data. And the last one is to look for patterns in your categorization. After organizing and interpreting the data, the researcher should present their findings. Typically, reports on verbal reports include a review of relevant literature, for example, previous studies on reading or listening strategy research, and followed by the overall research question with an explanation of why it is important to examine this question. Next, there is generally a discussion of the coding system that has been used on and how it was devised. Finally, there is a presentation of the data analysis, often in a table form, in which the researcher describes the kinds of strategies most commonly used by the respondents they studied. And this is the example of research which is used the verbal reports data. The title is Exploring Listening Comprehension Tactics and Their Interaction Patterns. There are two research questions. The first one is what listening strategies and tactics do ESL learners use? And the second one, how do comprehension tactics interact in sequences of processing? Is there a difference between learners of different listening abilities in the use and interaction of tactics? And then methodology. The verbal data on listening processes are predominantly retrospective. So the informants were female students aged between 18 and 19 from the People's Republic of China. And then the data were collected mainly through immediate retrospective verbalization or think aloud session. And there are also two listening passages that were adapted from How to Listen by Marian Judges, and one described the effects of ultraviolet light on our eyes, and other described the camel's hump or camel passage. And then, in order to identify tactics from the data, Erickson and Simon's principles of human information processing were used to distinguish verbal data on actual strategy used from general statements about strategies. And the interviews were transcribed and reports that showed strategic processing were identified, interpreted, and coded. For the example is number 1, the informant said that there may be several words I did not understand, so it can be categorized into the tactic that identify words not understood, and then it can be categorized in the metacognitive strategies. And the second one, because the sentence compared the camel with other animals, so it is the tactic that using context to draw inferences, so it can be categorized in the cognitive strategy and so on. And the result and the discussion that there are 44 listening tactics have been identified. In the comparison of the two learners' retrospective protocols, it was found that although they used many similar strategies, the higher ability listener demonstrated more effective use of both cognitive and metacognitive tactics. The paper concludes that examining specific tactics was useful in clarifying some strategies in the literature and that an investigation of how individual techniques interact in processing sequences could offer insights into cognitive differences between learners. So and then the second types of introspective techniques is diary studies. So one of the first definition of diary studies was offered by Bailey and Osner 1983. A diary study in second language learning, acquisition, or teaching is an account of second language experience as recorded in a first-person journal. The diarist may be a language teacher or a language learner, but the central characteristic of the diary studies is that they are introspective. The diarist studies his own teaching or learning, thus he can report on affective factors, language learning strategies, and his own perception. Facets of the language learning experience which are normally hidden or largely inaccessible to an external observer. And then how to collect the data. So in conducting any diary study, Bailey 1990 recommends that the following steps be taken. The first one, provide information about L2 learners and teachers and their perspectives on the affective and instructional factors that affect L2 learning and teaching. And the second one, the diarist keeps an account of his or her personal language learning or teaching history, systematically recording events, details, and feeling about the current language learning or teaching experience in the diary. And the third, the diarist revises the journal in entries for the public version of the diary and clarifying meanings of the entries in the process. And then the researcher, who may be the diarist, studies the journal entries, looking for patterns and significant events. Also, other researchers may analyze the diary entries. And then the factors identified as being important to the language learning or teaching experience are interpreted and discussed in the final report. After collecting the data, now the researcher should organize and interpreting the data. In order to undertake a comprehensive interpretation of the data, it is important to analyze the following aspects of the diary. There are three aspects that is important. The first one is the context or what is said, the context or where it is said, and the last one the form or how it is said. So the first one is the context or what is said. As Pavlenko 2007 points out, it is important in looking at narrative data to consider not only what was said or written, but also what was omitted and why. And the second one, the context or where it is said. The second focus of your analysis can be on the context of the diary entries, both on a macro and micro level. It is according to Pavlenko 2007. And the last one, the form or how it is said. So some excerpts of a diary might be written in full sentences in paragraph form, while other excerpts might be written far more informally. Some excerpts may use more complex and formal lexical items than others. And then how to present the findings. So published diary studies begin with a rationale for the study and a description of how the data was gathered and analyzed, followed by a presentation of the findings. The findings section contains carefully selected excerpts from the data to clearly exemplify recurring themes. Sometimes just one excerpt is presented to illustrate one theme or subtheme. However, often 3 or 4 excerpts are presented together. So this is the example of research that use diary study. The title is On Becoming a Language Teacher, Insights from Diary Studies. The study presents the result of a secondary analysis of 26 diary studies by novice ESL teachers. And all of the US teachers were enrolled in a master's degree of program in TESOL and had less than 6 months of prior teaching experience. in order to identify some of the common themes that emerge among novice ESL teachers in their first semester of teaching. Each participant wrote a personal language learning history, diary entries during a 10-week teaching semester, and last one an analysis of their diaries. So after a secondary analysis of the 26 diary studies, the following general categories of potential interest to the teacher educators emerge. First, the preoccupations of novice teachers with their own teaching experience, and then the second one, the transfer of the teaching methods or techniques used in the teacher's own L2 learning, and the third one, unexpected discoveries about effective teaching, and the last one, continued frustration with teaching. Yeah, so I think that's all from my presentation. Thank you.